What if the most beautiful family harmony in music history was a complete illusion? At 79 years old, Barry Gibb finally admitted something dark about his twin brother Robin, something that shatters decades of nostalgia. They made billions singing about love while living in a cold world of bitter rivalry. And the final surviving brother is now haunted by a regret so heavy, it changes everything we thought we knew about the Bee Gees. Imagine being the last person alive who knows the real secrets behind some of the biggest songs ever written. That's Barry Gibb's everyday life. He's the only surviving member of the Bee Gees, sitting alone with the master tapes, the memories, and a truth he kept buried for decades. For years, the Bee Gees put on a flawless show. When Barry, Robin, and Maurice sang together, their voices blended so perfectly that fans swore the brothers could read each other's minds. But that beautiful music was hiding something messy. Behind the scenes, the brothers struggled to connect. The harmony on stage masked a deep emotional distance that lasted an entire lifetime. But here's where it gets strange. The signs were always there, hiding in plain sight. Look closely at their old interview footage and you'll notice something unsettling. Barry and Robin almost never made eye contact. They rarely stood close together when the cameras weren't rolling. The public saw a tight-knit group of loving brothers, but the reality was far colder. Outside the recording studio, they were essentially business partners living completely separate lives. Now, near the end of his journey, Barry is finally talking about what went wrong. His confession about Robin completely changes how we see their entire legacy. But to understand why it's so devastating, we need to go back, all the way to the very beginning, when two brothers who would one day write the world's greatest love songs were already becoming strangers. The Gibb family started out in Manchester, England, just after World War II. Money was desperately tight. Their parents were musically gifted but completely overwhelmed raising 5 children in near poverty. The household was chaotic, the pressure constant, and young Robin was already developing a habit that would terrify the whole neighborhood. He became a pyromaniac. Robin had a dangerous fixation with matches and setting fire to local billboards. It got so bad that police officers actually asked the Gibb family to pack up and leave. And just like that, in 1958, the entire family relocated to Redcliffe, Australia, chasing a fresh start. What they found next, nobody expected. To put food on the table, the young brothers started singing at local racetracks, performing between races for pocket change. They chased every talent show they could find. Barry, the eldest, naturally stepped into the lead. Before long, they had a following across Australia. But to reach the level of success they were dreaming of, they needed to go back to England. And that journey would accidentally trigger the first explosion that nearly destroyed the band forever. When the brothers boarded a ship back to England in early 1967, they were broke but burning with ambition. Their father had sent demo tapes to a major London entertainment company run by the Beatles' manager, Brian Epstein. By a stroke of absolute luck, those tapes landed on the desk of Robert Stigwood, an ambitious executive who was hungry for the next big thing. The moment the Gibbs stepped off that boat, Stigwood auditioned them and signed them on the spot. Almost overnight, they were scoring massive hits. They went from penniless kids to glamorous superstars pulling in money they had never imagined. And that sudden rise to fame was the fuel that set the hidden rivalry ablaze. What came next tore the brothers completely apart, and it all came down to a single piece of vinyl. Robin had written a song called Lamplight, and believed it was going to be their biggest hit ever. But Barry had also written a song, 1st of May, and was equally convinced his was the one. When management chose Barry's song as the lead single, Robin felt publicly humiliated. He was 19 years old, proud, and furious. He walked away from his brothers to launch a solo career. Instead of sitting down to talk it out, Barry and Robin waged war through British music magazine headlines, trading bitter insults in print. Robin scored a quick hit with Saved by the Bell, but solo success didn't heal the wound underneath. By late 1970, the pain of separation eventually brought them back together. They shook hands for the cameras and admitted they needed each other musically. But they fixed the business while leaving every emotional wound completely untouched. And a musical revolution was coming that would rip those wounds wide open again. By 1974, the reunited band found their career stalling. In a bold move, they relocated to Miami, Florida, and teamed up with legendary producer Arif Mardin, who completely stripped away their old sound and pushed them toward a groove-heavy rhythm and soul direction. Then, during a recording session for a song called Nights on Broadway, something happened that nobody saw coming. Mardin asked if anyone could hit a high note to add excitement to the track. Barry opened his mouth and unleashed a soaring, supernatural falsetto that left everyone in the room stunned. That accidental discovery would change everything, and for Robin, it would begin a slow, painful unraveling. By 1977, that new sound exploded globally with the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. Barry's falsetto became the defining voice of an entire era. The media crowned him the face and voice of the Bee Gees. And Robin, whose emotional vibrato had powered their greatest early hits, was quietly pushed to the background. He was making millions, but his individual identity was being swallowed whole by his older brother's massive shadow. To survive the pressure, Robin developed a defense mechanism. He detached himself, mentally and physically, from the group. He became a ghost within his own band, delivering flawless performances on stage and vanishing into total isolation the moment the lights went down. The inner circle had become less like a family and more like a corporation. Every creative decision, which songs made the album, which track became the single, was decided by strict majority vote. And Robin used those rules as a psychological shield to protect himself from the anxiety eating him alive. But here's the part most people never knew. The only reason any of this held together was because of one man. Maurice Gibb, the fraternal twin, quietly held the entire band in his hands. He set his own ego aside and stepped into the space between Barry and Robin, absorbing the tension and keeping the peace. Without Maurice in the middle, the Bee Gees would have collapsed years earlier. And that made what happened in 2003 all the more devastating. The family had already absorbed one unbearable blow in 1988 when their youngest brother, Andy, died at only 30 years old from a heart condition brought on by years of severe addiction. Despite his brothers paying for rehab and trying to help him rebuild his career, Andy's body gave out. His death left Barry, Robin, and Maurice carrying a permanent weight of survivor's guilt, endlessly wondering if they could have done more. Still, the three remaining brothers held on, held together by Maurice. Then, without warning, Maurice was rushed to the hospital with a twisted intestine and suffered a fatal cardiac arrest. He was gone. Barry declared the Bee Gees finished, vowing never to perform under that name again. And what happened next broke what little remained of the brothers' relationship. Barry fell into a deep, paralyzing depression. He spent months on his couch, unable to create, unable to function. Robin did the exact opposite. He booked solo world tours immediately, trying to outrun his grief by staying in constant motion. And then he started performing classic Bee Gees songs by himself, including Barry's signature falsetto parts. Watching from a distance, Barry felt nothing but betrayal. Those vocal arrangements were sacred family property. Seeing Robin sing them alone felt like an open wound being salted. With their mediator gone, the two surviving brothers stopped speaking entirely. The silence that followed lasted years. Robin toured relentlessly, Germany, Russia, Asia, chasing the individual recognition he felt he had never truly received. Back home in England, his personal life was equally turbulent. He was living through a highly publicized relationship scandal and an unconventional marriage, none of which brought him closer to peace. Meanwhile, Barry lived quietly in Florida, and the two men, aging, wealthy, just hours apart by plane, remained completely imprisoned by their own stubbornness. Neither of them made the call. Neither of them crossed the distance. And that silence might have gone on forever, until fate made the decision for them in the most brutal way possible. While preparing for more performances, Robin was rushed to the hospital with crippling abdominal pain. Doctors found a tumor. The diagnosis was colorectal cancer that had already spread to his liver. Robin kept the news hidden from the public and from his own family for months. He refused to slow down, channeling his remaining energy into composing a massive classical album called the Titanic Requiem alongside his son. As he wrote the orchestral arrangements, his body was quietly disappearing. But he kept pushing forward in the studio, right up until he couldn't anymore. By April 2012, Robin was too weak to attend the London premiere of his own masterpiece. He contracted pneumonia, fell into a coma, and passed away on May 20, 2012. The era of silence between the brothers was over, ended not by a phone call or a conversation, but by a funeral. Barry was now completely alone, the last surviving member of the four Gibb brothers. And the real torment was only just beginning. In January 2021, during a remarkably candid interview, Barry finally said it out loud. He and Robin were brothers, yes, but they were never truly friends. Every single brother he lost died during a period when they were either estranged or not speaking. Andy, Maurice, Robin, all three were gone before any real reconciliation could happen. Barry is left carrying the full, unresolved weight of those silences, and there is no one left to forgive, and no one left to forgive him. He has described the experience of performing solo as feeling like his brothers are standing right next to him, and then the crushing realization that they're not. To cope, he designed his mythology tour around massive video screens playing archival footage of his brothers singing beside him. He sees Robin in his dreams. He questions constantly why he was the one destined to outlive everyone he loved. But Barry hasn't stopped. With his son Stephen and Maurice's daughter Samantha by his side, he's carrying the family legacy into a new generation. His wife Linda pulled him out of the deepest depression, and in 2021 he released Greenfields, reimagining classic Bee Gees songs alongside country legends. The music proved as timeless as ever. But Barry Gibb's admission proves something just as powerful, that even the most perfect harmony can hide a lifetime of unspoken pain. And sometimes, the saddest songs aren't the ones that made the record. They're the conversations that never happened.